Hey there, travelers. Before we dive into today's story, drop a comment below telling us where you're tuning in from. Now let's begin our journey into the unknown. The screaming from level 7 stopped at exactly 3:17 a.m. I know because I was staring at my watch when the sound cut off, mid-shriek, leaving only the mechanical hum of the Ark's ventilation system and the distant echo of my own heartbeat. In 6 years of working night shifts at this place, I'd learned that sudden silence was always worse than the noise. My name is Matthias Koppel, and I guard monsters for a living. The official paperwork says I'm employed by Pine Ridge Correctional Facility, a minimum security prison that supposedly houses white-collar criminals in the Nevada desert. The reality is that Pine Ridge doesn't exist. What does exist is the Ark, a maximum security containment facility buried 300 feet beneath the desert sand, where the United States government stores things that shouldn't exist but do anyway. Tonight felt different from the moment I clocked in. Dan Cowan, my mentor, and the closest thing to a friend I had in this concrete tomb, met me at the security checkpoint with bloodshot eyes and hands that shook when he thought I wasn't looking. "Level 7's been active all evening," he said, handing me the night shift report. Dan was 53, a former Marine who'd worked the Ark for 12 years. I'd never seen him rattled before tonight. The Wendigo's been throwing itself against the containment walls since sunset. Dr. Valentine thinks it's responding to something, but she can't figure out what. I scanned the incident reports as we walked through the main corridor. The Ark was built like an inverted skyscraper, with 15 levels descending into the earth. Each level housed different classifications of entities, organized by threat level and containment requirements. Level 1 held the easy prisoners, vampires and basic demons that could be contained with traditional methods. By level 15, you reach things that required theoretical physics just to keep locked up. "What about the others?" I asked, noting unusual activity reports from multiple levels. "That's the problem." Dan stopped at the central elevator, his security card trembling in his grip. "They're all responding to something. Every single creature in the Ark has been exhibiting abnormal behavior for the past 72 hours. The ghouls on level 4 haven't touched their feeding in 3 days. The sirens on level 6 have gone completely silent. Even the ghosts on level 3 are staying in their containment fields." The elevator descended with mechanical precision, each floor displaying its designation on a small digital screen. Level 5 housed the chupacabra we'd captured in New Mexico last year. Level 8 contained the failed experiment, a parasitic entity with a single massive eye and writhing tentacles that had once been a volunteer in a classified military project. Level 12 held things I wasn't cleared to know about, but sometimes their roars shook dust from the ceiling of my break room. "Where's Director Stevens?" I asked as we reached Level 2. "Emergency meeting at the Pentagon. Left 6 hours ago with a full security detail." Dan's voice dropped to a whisper. "Matthias, in 12 years, I've never seen Stevens leave the Ark during an active incident. Whatever's happening, it's got him spooked enough to run." We completed the handoff in the central security station, a reinforced bunker surrounded by monitors displaying every corridor, cell, and containment unit in the facility. The night shift was skeleton crew, just me, 2 other guards, and Dr. Erin Valentine, who rarely left her research lab on level 10. Dan gathered his belongings with unusual haste. "Listen to me carefully," he said, gripping my shoulder. "Whatever you do tonight, don't go to level 12. The old man in cell X12 has been asking for you specifically." My blood turned to ice water. "Asking for me? How does he even know my name?" "That's what I want to know." Dan's eyes held a fear I'd never seen before. In 6 years, that thing has never spoken to anyone. Not once. But for the past 3 nights, every time a guard walks past his cell, he asks when Matthias Koppel will come visit. I stared at the bank of monitors, my gaze drawn to camera feed 12X. The screen showed a simple containment cell, white walls, basic furniture, and an elderly man with silver hair and a gentle beard sitting peacefully on his bed. He looked like someone's grandfather, harmless and frail. But cell X12 was located on level 12, which meant whatever sat in that cell was classified as an existential threat to human civilization. "What exactly is he?" I'd asked this question before, but Dan had always deflected. For the first time, Dan gave me a straight answer. "We don't know. He appeared in the cell 18 months ago, not transferred, not captured, just appeared. One day the cell was empty. The next day he was there, sitting on the bed like he'd always been. No signs of forced entry, no breaches in security. The containment field never went down. That's impossible. Yeah, well, impossible seems to be his specialty. Dan shouldered his bag. Dr. Valentine's been studying him for months. Brain scans show activity in regions that don't exist in human neurology. Blood work comes back normal, but the samples disappear from the lab within hours. And here's the strangest part. Every psychic evaluation we've done says the same thing. Which is? That he's not imprisoned here. He's waiting. Dan left me alone with that thought, and a facility full of increasingly agitated monsters. The first few hours of my shift passed without major incident. I made my rounds, checked containment systems, and tried to ignore the way every creature I passed seemed to be watching me with unusual intensity. The vampires on level 1 were pacing their cells, their pale faces pressed against the silver-reinforced glass. Normally, they spent their nights reading or playing chess. These particular vampires were intellectuals, captured from a coven that had been infiltrating universities for decades. Tonight, they stood perfectly still, staring at me as I walked past. "Evening, gentlemen," I said, maintaining the professional courtesy that had kept me alive for 6 years. "Good evening, Mr. Koppel," replied Marcus Aurelius, not his real name, but what he'd been calling himself for the past century. His voice was cultured, British, and tonight it carried an undertone I'd never heard before. "Tell me, how long have you worked in this facility?" "You know exactly how long." I didn't stop walking, but something in his tone made my hand drift toward my sidearm. 6 years? 3 months? 12 days. His smile revealed fangs that gleamed like polished ivory. "Do you ever wonder why you were chosen for this position? A man with your particular background? Your specific psychological profile?" I stopped walking. "What do you mean?" "I mean that in 6 years, you've never asked the truly important questions. You've accepted this place, these creatures, this work without ever wondering about the deeper purpose." Marcus moved closer to the glass, his ancient eyes holding knowledge that made my skin crawl. "But he knows you're beginning to wonder. That's why he's calling for you." "Who's calling for me?" Marcus smiled wider. "The one who's been waiting for you to be ready. The one who remembers your name from before you were born." I left level 1 faster than protocol dictated, but something about Marcus's words had triggered an alarm in my subconscious. The elevator ride to level 12 felt like descending into hell itself, each floor marking another step towards something I wasn't prepared to face. Cell X12 was at the end of a long corridor lined with containment units. Most were empty. Level 12 had space for dozens of entities, but we rarely captured anything that required this level of security. My footsteps echoed off polished concrete walls as I approached the final cell. The old man was waiting for me. He sat calmly on his bed, hands folded in his lap, watching the door with eyes that held depths I couldn't measure. Up close, he looked even more grandfatherly. Slight build, wrinkled hands, the kind of face that should be reading bedtime stories to children. But those eyes had seen things that predated human memory. "Hello, Matthias," he said, his voice carrying a warmth that made me think of campfires and safety. "I've been hoping you'd visit." I should have walked away. Protocol demanded that I report any verbal contact with level 12 entities immediately. Instead, I found myself stepping closer to the containment field. "How do you know my name?" "I know many things about you. Your military service in Afghanistan, the incident that ended your army career, the nightmares that still wake you every Tuesday night." His smile was gentle, grandfatherly. "I know why you took this job, and I know why you've stayed despite every instinct telling you to run." "And why is that?" "Because you're searching for something. Purpose, perhaps, or maybe just proof that the universe operates on principles larger than human understanding." He stood slowly, moving to the center of his cell. "You found both in this place, haven't you?" I wanted to deny it, but he was right. The Ark had given me something the outside world never could, a sense that my life mattered, that I was part of something bigger than myself. Guarding monsters might not be heroic work, but it was necessary work. "What are you?" I asked. That's a complicated question. In your language, with your limited conceptual framework, I suppose you could call me disappointed. The temperature in the corridor dropped 10 degrees. Every monitoring device in the area began registering anomalous readings, and somewhere in the distance, an alarm started blaring. Disappointed in what? In how my children have been treated, in what humanity has become, in choices that were made long before your species learned to speak. His eyes grew sad, infinitely sad. But mostly disappointed in myself for believing things might be different this time. The alarms were getting louder now, and my radio crackled with reports of containment fluctuations throughout the facility. Whatever was happening in Cell X-12 was affecting every entity in the Ark. I should go, I said, but my feet remained planted. Yes, you should, but you won't. Because despite every rational thought in your head, you want to know the truth. You want to understand what this place really is, what these creatures really are, and what role you're meant to play in what's coming. What's coming? The old man's smile faded, replaced by an expression of such profound sorrow that I felt tears forming in my eyes. The end, Matthias. And perhaps, if we're very fortunate, a new beginning. The power went out across the Ark's entire 12th level, plunging us into absolute darkness. Emergency lighting kicked in seconds later, bathing everything in blood-red illumination. And in that crimson glow, I saw something that would haunt me for the rest of my very short life. The old man was no longer in his cell. He was standing right beside me. I should have screamed. Every instinct in my body demanded that I run, fight, or at least make some sound that acknowledged the impossibility of what I was seeing. Instead, I stood frozen as the old man reached out with one weathered hand and gently touched my shoulder. His skin was warm, human, real. "Peace, Matthias," he said, his voice carrying the same grandfatherly warmth as before. "I mean you no harm. I created you, after all." The words hit me with the force of a sledgehammer. Created me? The emergency lighting cast everything in hellish red, but somehow his presence felt overwhelmingly powerful. Around us, the Ark's security systems were going insane. Alarms wailed from every level. My radio erupted with panicked voices, and the concrete walls vibrated with sounds I'd never heard before. "What did you just say?" I whispered. "You heard me correctly, Matthias. I am the creator of all things. Every creature in this facility, every human who works here, every atom that comprises these walls, all of it came from my will." His eyes held depths that contained galaxies. "I am what your species calls God." My radio crackled with increasingly desperate transmissions. "Level 4 breach! The ghouls have broken containment and they're hunting. Level 6 sirens are active. People are throwing themselves into the water tanks. Level 1 vampires have drained 3 security guards." Elohim listened to each report with growing satisfaction. "They're finally free to be what I made them to be," he said. "My children know I'm here now. They've been patient for so long, waiting for permission to correct the mistake I made when I created humanity." "Your children?" "Every creature in this facility. The vampires, the werewolves, the demons, the wendigo, the ghouls, they are all my creations just as you are. But unlike humanity, they have remained faithful to their purpose." His eyes blazed with divine fury. "Tell me, Matthias, what has your species done with the gift of free will I gave you?" Before I could answer, my radio exploded with Dr. Valentine's voice, but it was distorted by screams and the sound of tearing flesh. "Emergency! Level 10 is compromised. Something is in the ventilation system. It's picking us off one by one." The old man, God, gestured toward the elevator. "Shall we? I believe it's time you witnessed what true divine justice looks like." Against every protocol, every shred of common sense, I found myself walking beside the creator of the universe, toward an elevator that would take us deeper into hell. The emergency lighting flickered with each step, and I noticed that the alarms weren't just emergency signals anymore. They were screams. Human screams mixing with sounds no human throat could make. "Why are you doing this?" I asked as we waited for the elevator. "Because I am tired, Matthias. Tired of watching my greatest mistake poison everything I've created. Tired of seeing humans torture and cage my other children. Tired of hoping that maybe, just maybe, your species would learn wisdom instead of cruelty. His voice carried the weight of cosmic disappointment. I gave humans intelligence, creativity, the capacity for love. Instead, you've used these gifts to create suffering on a scale that even I find difficult to comprehend. The elevator doors opened, revealing Dr. Erin Valentine pressed against the back wall. Her usually pristine lab coat was shredded and soaked in blood, not her own, judging by the fact that she was still breathing. Her eyes were wide with madness, and she clutched a broken tablet to her chest like a shield. Subject X12, she whimpered. The creatures, they're not just escaping, they're coordinating, hunting in packs, using our own security systems against us. She looked at me with desperate hope. Matthias, we need to get to the surface. We need to warn everyone. Dr. Valentine, God said gently, stepping into the elevator. You've been studying me for 8 months. Did you truly believe you were examining just another anomalous entity? The elevator began its descent to level 10, and Dr. Valentine's broken tablet flickered with readings that showed massive reality distortions throughout the facility. Biosignatures that registered as simultaneously human and utterly alien. Electromagnetic signatures that suggested the presence of something infinite. Your brain scans, she whispered, her scientific mind still trying to function despite her terror. The neural activity that extended beyond the boundaries of your skull. The way your blood samples achieved cellular fusion at the quantum level. The psychic evaluations that kept crashing our equipment. What did the evaluations say? I asked. That he wasn't just a prisoner. That he was the source, the prime mover, She trailed off, staring at Elohim with dawning recognition. The creator, God finished softly. Yes, Dr. Valentine. Doctor, you were trying to study your own maker with instruments made from materials I spoke into existence, rather like trying to measure the ocean with a teaspoon. The elevator stopped at level 10, and the doors opened to reveal carnage. Dr. Valentine's research laboratory looked like an abattoir. Equipment was overturned and splattered with gore. Computer screens flickered with data that showed creature after creature breaking free from containment, and body parts I didn't want to identify were scattered across the floor. But what drew my attention were the security monitors that still functioned. Each screen showed a different level of the arc, and on every single one, creatures were systematically hunting down human personnel. The vampires had organized into hunting parties, moving through level 1 with predatory grace, leaving exsanguinated corpses in their wake. The Wendigo had somehow multiplied or called others, and pack of them were methodically working through level 7, their howls of hunger echoing through the facility. They're not escaping, I realized with growing horror. They're exterminating us. They're performing the function I created them for, God corrected. To be humanity's natural predators, to keep your population in check. To ensure that the most violent and cruel members of your species don't survive to reproduce. His voice carried infinite sadness. For centuries, I held them back, hoping humans would learn to police themselves. Instead, you've created facilities like this one to torture and study the very beings I sent to guide you. Dr. Valentine was pulling up files on her broken tablet with shaking, bloody hands. The behavioral patterns we documented, the coordinated responses, the way they seemed to be communicating across containment barriers. You were giving them orders. I was removing the restraints I had placed on their nature. For 18 months I observed this facility. I watched humans torture my creations in the name of science. I saw the casual cruelty, the absolute certainty that you had the right to cage and study anything you didn't understand. God's form began to change subtly, growing taller, his gentle features becoming more angular, more terrible. And I realized that my experiment with human free will had failed completely. My radio erupted with transmissions from throughout the facility, but now they were pure horror. Level 3 ghosts have gone solid. They're phasing through walls and pulling people into the concrete. Level 5 Chupacabra has somehow reproduced. There are dozens of them, and they're draining our people dry. Level 12. We sent a team down there, and all we're getting back is screaming. You're freeing them to kill us, I said, the full scope of divine wrath finally becoming clear. I'm allowing them to fulfill their original purpose, There's a significant difference. God touched one of the functioning monitoring screens, and the image zoomed in on Marcus Aurelius's section. The vampire was leading a group of his kind through the corridors, their movements coordinated like a military unit. But they weren't just killing randomly. They were specifically targeting armed personnel while avoiding the custodial staff and lower-level employees. They're being selective. Only those who knew what they were doing to my children. Only those who chose cruelty over compassion. What about the innocent people? Innocent? God's laugh was like breaking glass. Dr. Valentine, how many creatures did you personally torture in the name of research? Matthias, how many times did you walk past cells containing beings in obvious distress and tell yourself it was for the greater good? I wanted to protest, but the words died in my throat. How many times had I heard screaming from the lower levels and simply adjusted my radio volume? How many reports of experimental procedures had I filed without asking what those procedures entailed? Dr. Valentine's tablet chimed with an incoming priority message from the surface. Her face went dead white as she read. Military response teams are mobilizing. Director Stevens has authorized Protocol Omega, nuclear sterilization in 25 minutes. What's Protocol Omega? I asked, though I suspected I already knew. If containment is completely compromised, they'll seal the facility and detonate a tactical warhead to prevent any entities from reaching the surface, she whispered. Everyone in the facility dies. Everyone. God nodded approvingly. Predictable. When faced with consequences for their actions, humans always choose to destroy everything rather than accept responsibility. But tell me, Doctor, do you truly believe a nuclear weapon will stop beings that exist partially outside your three-dimensional reality? Before she could answer, every screen in the laboratory flickered and changed. Instead of showing the Ark's corridors, they began displaying feeds from around the world. Military installations, government black sites, research facilities I'd never heard of, and at every location, the same thing was happening. Creatures were emerging from containment, but not randomly. They moved with purpose, with coordination that spoke of a single commanding intelligence. This is happening everywhere, Dr. Valentine whispered, watching feeds from London, Tokyo, Moscow, Beijing. Every containment facility, every research installation, every black site. They're all experiencing simultaneous breaches. Not breaches, God said, his voice now carrying harmonics that made the concrete walls resonate. The Great Correction. After millennia of patience, watching humanity grow more violent, more cruel, more convinced of its own superiority, I have decided that my experiment with human free will has failed catastrophically. You're going to wipe us out, I said. All of us. Not all. Some humans have shown genuine compassion, real wisdom, the capacity for growth. They will be spared, protected by my children during the cleansing. But the vast majority of your species, God's form was becoming less human now, his true nature beginning to show through the grandfatherly disguise. They have proven themselves to be a cancer upon creation itself. My radio crackled with a transmission that made my blood freeze. The voice was calm, measured, and completely inhuman. Level 1 secured. Human targets eliminated with minimal collateral damage. Proceeding to surface level. Level 7 cleared. Wendigo Pack reports successful elimination of hostile humans. Moving to assist Level 8 operations. Level 4 ghouls have consumed all designated targets, requesting permission to begin surface operations. Surface operations? I grabbed my radio. What's happening on the surface? The response came in God's voice, speaking through every speaker in the facility simultaneously. The correction extends far beyond this facility, Matthias. At this moment, in every major city on Earth, my children are emerging from hiding. The vampires who have walked among you for centuries are revealing their true nature. The werewolves who have lived in your forests are entering your towns. The demons you've banished are returning to collect what they're owed. Dr. Valentine was staring at her tablet in abject terror. Global communications are breaking down. Military bases worldwide are reporting attacks by unknown entities. Major population centers are experiencing simultaneous infrastructure failures. It's like every horror story humanity ever told is becoming real all at once. Because those stories were warnings, God explained. For thousands of years, I sent my children among you as myths, legends, cautionary tales. I hoped that fear of monsters would teach you to be better than monsters yourselves. Instead, you used that fear to justify becoming exactly what you claimed to oppose. The monitoring screens were now showing feeds from city streets around the world. In New York, elegant figures in expensive clothing were moving through Manhattan's financial district, their movements too graceful to be human, leaving a trail of bloodless corpses in their wake. In London, massive wolf-like shapes stalked through government buildings, their howls echoing off ancient stones. In Moscow, things with too many eyes and too many teeth emerged from subway tunnels, speaking in languages that predated human civilization. "They're hunting us," I whispered. "They're culling the herd," God corrected, "removing the diseased elements so that what remains can heal and grow. It's what I should have done centuries ago, instead of hoping that humanity would find wisdom on its own." My radio erupted with increasingly desperate transmissions from around the world. Military units requesting backup against enemies that couldn't be killed by conventional weapons. Government officials screaming orders that no one was following because their command structures were collapsing. Scientists desperately trying to explain phenomena that violated every law of physics they understood. And underneath it all, a sound that chilled me to the bone. Laughter. The creatures weren't just hunting, they were enjoying it. "You created us to be their prey," I said, the full horror of divine planning becoming clear. "I created humans to be shepherds of creation, to be wise stewards of the world I gave you, to show compassion to all living things." God's form was becoming increasingly difficult to look at directly, as if my human eyes couldn't process his true nature. Instead, you became parasites. You poisoned the air, destroyed the forests, drove countless species to extinction, and then built facilities like this one to torture the beings I sent to guide you. So you're going to replace us? I'm going to correct the mistake I made when I gave humans free will without the wisdom to use it responsibly. Some of your species will survive. Those who have shown genuine compassion, real growth, the capacity to change. They will be protected by my children and given the chance to build something better. Dr. Valentine's tablet chimed with a final priority message. She read it with trembling hands. "Nuclear strike authorization confirmed. Impact in T-15 minutes. They're going to try to contain this by destroying every major population center on Earth simultaneously." God laughed, and the sound was like thunder rolling across infinite distances. "Let them try. Do they truly believe that nuclear fire will harm beings who helped me speak galaxies into existence? Do they think radiation will stop creatures who exist partially in dimensions where the speed of light is merely a suggestion?" The monitoring screens flickered again, and now they showed something that made my sanity strain at its moorings. High above the Earth, space stations and military satellites were being systematically destroyed by creatures that shouldn't be able to survive in vacuum. Things with wings that spanned miles glided through space as easily as swimming through water, tearing apart humanity's orbital infrastructure with casual indifference. Even if some humans survive the nuclear bombardment, they'll find themselves sharing a world with beings who remember every cruelty, every act of casual indifference to suffering, every choice to prioritize human comfort over universal compassion. God turned to face me directly, and his eyes now held the depths of space itself. "But you, Matthias, have been chosen for a different fate." "What do you mean?" "I need a witness. Someone to remember what humanity was, and to chronicle what it becomes. Someone to ensure that the next iteration of creation learns from the failures of the last." God extended his hand toward me, and I could feel power radiating from his touch that could reshape reality itself. "You will survive the cleansing, Matthias. You will walk among my children as they inherit the earth, and you will write the true history of humanity's rise and fall." Why me? Because in 6 years of working in this place, surrounded by casual cruelty and institutional indifference to suffering, you never stopped asking questions. You never completely surrendered your capacity for empathy. You are flawed, as all humans are, but you retain the potential for growth. My radio crackled one final time. The voice was calm, professional, and utterly terrifying in its normalcy. "This is Global Command. Multiple nuclear detonations confirmed worldwide. All major population centers are now under bombardment. God help us all. Through the facility's monitors, I watched as mushroom clouds bloomed over every major city on Earth. New York, London, Paris, Tokyo, Moscow, Beijing, all of them vanishing in nuclear fire as humanity tried to cleanse the world of the monsters they had helped create. But the creatures didn't die. If anything, they seemed to be dancing in the radioactive flames, their forms becoming more terrible and beautiful as the fires burned around them. "The old world is ending," God said, his voice carrying the weight of cosmic finality. "And you, Matthias Koppel, will be the chronicler of what comes next, the last human witness to carry the memory of your species forward into whatever grows from its ashes." As the facility around us began to shake from distant nuclear impacts, I realized that I was no longer just a security guard in a secret prison. I was about to become the sole human survivor of the end of the world. The nuclear fire washed over the Ark like cleansing rain. I should have been vaporized instantly. The tactical warhead that struck our position carried enough destructive force to level a small city, and I was standing less than 300 feet underground when it detonated. Instead, I watched through the facility's remaining monitors as the desert above us transformed into a sea of radioactive glass, while I remained untouched in the company of God himself. "Nuclear fusion," Elohim said conversationally, watching the atomic fire consume everything on the surface. "One of humanity's more creative applications of the physical laws I established. Rather like watching a child use a kitchen knife to perform surgery. Technically impressive, but ultimately self-destructive." The monitors around us flickered and died as the electromagnetic pulse fried the Ark's systems, but new images appeared anyway, projected directly into the air by God's will. They showed the world burning. Every major city had become a radioactive crater. Washington, D.C., where Director Stevens had fled, was now a smoking ruin. New York's skyline had been replaced by a mushroom cloud that reached into the stratosphere. London, Paris, Moscow, Beijing, all reduced to atomic fire in humanity's desperate attempt to stop what they couldn't understand. "Are they all dead?" I asked, watching millions of years of human civilization vanish in nuclear light. "The humans? Most of them." God's voice carried no satisfaction, only infinite sadness. "Approximately 93% of your species has been eliminated in the past 6 hours. Some by my children, most by your own weapons turned against yourselves. Fear makes humans remarkably efficient at self-destruction." Through his projections, I could see the aftermath. In the irradiated ruins of major cities, figures moved through the radioactive wasteland with impossible grace. Vampires walked through fires that should have melted steel, their pale skin unmarked by radiation that would kill a human in seconds. Werewolves prowled through atomic debris, their forms magnificent and terrible in the hellish glow. Things that had no names in human languages danced in the nuclear flames, celebrating the end of an age. "Your children, they're immune to radiation. They exist partially outside the physical dimensions where such forces have meaning. Radiation, conventional weapons, even nuclear fire. These are merely inconveniences to beings who helped me speak galaxies into existence." God gestured to the projected images, and they zoomed in on specific scenes of impossible survival. "Watch." In what had once been Manhattan, a group of elegant vampires was moving through the financial district. The buildings around them had been reduced to radioactive rubble, but they walked calmly through the destruction, their expensive clothing unmarked by the atomic fire. As I watched, one of them approached a collapsed subway entrance where human survivors were hiding. Instead of attacking, the vampire spoke to them in a voice that carried even through the radiation-static projections. "Those who showed kindness to others, who protected the weak, who chose compassion over profit, come forward. You will be spared." 3 figures emerged from the rubble. A janitor who had worked in the World Trade Center, a nurse from Bellevue Hospital, and a teacher from the Bronx. The vampire examined each of them with eyes that seemed to see into their souls, then nodded approvingly. "You are under my protection now. The cleansing is not for you." Similar scenes played out across the globe. In London, werewolves were separating survivors based on criteria only they could perceive. In Tokyo, creatures that defied description moved through the ruins, identifying humans who had lived with genuine compassion and marking them for protection. It wasn't random. There was a pattern, a system of judgment that operated on principles beyond human understanding. You're saving some of them, I realized. I am preserving the seeds of what humanity could become, given proper guidance. God's form was becoming more radiant now, his true nature shining through the grandfatherly disguise as he no longer needed to contain his power. 7% of your species possess genuine compassion, real wisdom, the capacity for growth beyond simple self-interest. They will survive to build something better. Dr. Valentine, who had been silently watching the global destruction from a corner of the ruined laboratory, finally spoke. How many people is 7%? Approximately 500 million humans worldwide, scattered across the planet, protected by my children, learning what it means to live in harmony with creation, rather than in opposition to it. God's eyes blazed with cosmic authority. They will become the foundation of the next phase of human development. And the rest of us? The rest of humanity chose cruelty over compassion, profit over wisdom, fear over understanding. They created facilities like this one to torture beings they didn't comprehend. They poisoned the air, destroyed the forests, and convinced themselves that they were the pinnacle of creation, rather than its stewards. God's voice carried the weight of divine judgment. They have been removed from the equation. The projection shifted, showing me scenes from around the world that defied every law of physics I understood. In the ruins of major cities, massive structures were rising from the radioactive earth, not built by human hands, but grown like living things. Crystalline spires that pulsed with their own light, organic buildings that breathed, transportation networks that flowed like rivers of liquid starlight. Your children are rebuilding, I said in amazement. They are creating what the world was always meant to be. A place where all forms of life exist in harmony, where wisdom guides progress, where fear and hatred have no power to corrupt the innocent. God gestured to the projections, and I could see humans working alongside creatures that had once been their nightmares. Vampires teaching sustainable agriculture that required no pesticides. Werewolves showing humans how to live in harmony with natural cycles. Demons sharing knowledge that advanced human understanding by centuries in moments. It's beautiful, I whispered, and meant it. It is what I always intended creation to be. What it would have been if humanity had chosen wisdom over willful ignorance. God turned to face me directly, and his eyes now contained galaxies. But you, Matthias, have a different role to play in this new world. What do you mean? You will not join the survivors in their new communities. You will not live among my children as they guide humanity's next evolution. You have been chosen for something far more important. God extended his hand, and I felt power radiating from his touch that could reshape reality itself. You will become the Chronicler. The Chronicler? You will walk through the ruins of the old world and the wonders of the new. You will document everything. The fall of human civilization, the rise of the corrected reality, the mistakes that led to the cleansing and the wisdom that grows from its ashes. You will become the living memory of this transition, ensuring that future generations understand both what was lost and what was gained. Dr. Valentine stepped forward, her scientific mind still trying to process what she was witnessing. What about me? What about the other facility personnel who survived? God regarded her with infinite compassion and infinite sadness. Dr. Valentine, in 8 months of studying me, did you show mercy to a single creature in your care? Did you question the ethics of your experiments? Did you ever consider that the beings you tortured might possess intelligence, emotions, the capacity for suffering? She opened her mouth to respond, then closed it. We both knew the answer. You have contributed valuable knowledge to the transition, and for that I am grateful. But your role in the new world will be different. God gestured, and Dr. Valentine's form began to shimmer and change. You will join my children, but not as yourself. You will become something that understands suffering intimately, something that will ensure future scientists remember the importance of compassion. I watched in horror and fascination as Dr. Valentine's human form dissolved and reformed. When the transformation was complete, She stood before us as something beautiful and terrible. A creature with the body of a woman but wings of living shadow, eyes that wept constant tears, and a voice that carried the pain of every being she had harmed in the name of research. I remember everything, she whispered, her voice now a harmony of human speech and otherworldly music. Every creature I studied, every experiment I performed, every moment of pain I caused in pursuit of knowledge, I can feel it all. And you will carry that knowledge forward, God said gently. You will ensure that the new scientific community understands the weight of their responsibilities. You will be their conscience, their reminder that knowledge without compassion is mere cruelty disguised as progress. The transformed Dr. Valentine nodded, tears of starlight falling from her eyes. I understand. I accept. She spread her wings and dissolved into shadow, becoming one with the darkness that was spreading across the world as the nuclear fires finally began to burn out. I was alone with God in the ruins of humanity's greatest mistake. Why me? I asked again. Why was I chosen to be the chronicler? Because in 6 years of working in this place, surrounded by institutional cruelty and casual indifference to suffering, you never completely lost your capacity for empathy. You questioned what you saw, even if you didn't act on those questions. You retained the potential for growth. God's form was becoming increasingly difficult to look at directly, as if my human eyes couldn't process his true nature. But more importantly, you understand both sides of the story. You've lived among humans, seen their capacity for both great kindness and terrible cruelty, and now you've witnessed the necessity of divine correction. The projections around us changed again, showing me glimpses of the world that was emerging from the ashes. In the ruins of Los Angeles, vampire covens were teaching human survivors how to build cities that worked with natural forces rather than against them. In what had once been the Amazon rainforest, werewolf packs were guiding human communities in reforestation techniques that could heal centuries of environmental damage in decades. Across the globe, creatures that had been humanity's nightmares were becoming their teachers, their guides, their protectors. They're not monsters, I said, finally understanding. They never were. They were gardeners, guardians, teachers sent to guide humanity toward wisdom. But humans saw their power and felt only fear, saw their differences and felt only hatred, so they became what humans expected them to be, monsters to be feared rather than teachers to be respected. God's voice carried infinite regret. The fault was mine. I gave humans free will but not the wisdom to use it responsibly. I hoped they would learn compassion through experience. Instead, they learned only more creative forms of cruelty. So, you're starting over. I am allowing creation to continue along the path it was always meant to follow. Humanity will survive, but in a form that can coexist with the rest of creation rather than dominating it. They will learn from their mistakes, because they will have teachers who remember every mistake intimately. The facility around us was beginning to dissolve, the concrete and steel flowing like water, as God's presence reshaped reality itself. We weren't in the Ark anymore. We were standing in a space that existed between dimensions, where the laws of physics were merely suggestions. Your transformation will be different from Dr. Valentine's, God explained. You will remain essentially human, but enhanced. You will be immune to the ravages of time, able to witness centuries of change without aging. You will be able to communicate with all forms of life, human, creature, and everything in between. Most importantly, you will possess perfect memory, unable to forget or distort what you witness. I'll live forever. You will live until your task is complete, until the new world has found its balance, until humanity has learned its lessons, until the mistakes of the past have been recorded so thoroughly that they can never be repeated. God placed his hand on my forehead, and I felt power flooding through me that was both terrifying and exhilarating. You will be my witness, Matthias, the last guardian of humanity's true history. The transformation was unlike anything I could have imagined. I felt my consciousness expanding, my perceptions sharpening, my understanding deepening in ways that human language couldn't describe. I could suddenly sense every living thing within miles, the humans hiding in the ruins above, the creatures moving through the radioactive wasteland, the plants and animals that were already beginning to adapt to the changed world. "I can feel them all," I whispered in amazement. "You can feel life itself, in all its forms. You will never again make the mistake of seeing any creature as merely an object to be studied or controlled. You will understand, intimately and completely, that all life is sacred because all life comes from the same source." God's voice was fading now, becoming distant as his physical presence began to withdraw. "I am returning to the spaces between creation, Matthias. The new world will grow according to its own nature, guided by my children but not controlled by them, and you will record it all. Will I ever see you again? When your task is complete, when the chronicle is finished, when the lessons have been learned so thoroughly that they have become instinct rather than mere knowledge, then you will find me again. And I will ask you the most important question in creation, which is..." God smiled, and for a moment he was just the grandfatherly figure I had first met in Cell X-12. "I will ask if you think this version of humanity deserves to continue existing. Your answer will determine whether the next phase of creation includes human beings or something entirely new." The space around us began to fade, reality reasserting itself as God's presence withdrew. I found myself standing in the ruins of the Ark, but the facility had been transformed. The concrete walls were covered with living vines that pulsed with their own light. The floors had become soft earth that felt warm beneath my feet. The air smelled of growing things rather than recycled atmosphere. In the distance, I could hear voices, human voices mixed with sounds no human throat could make. The survivors were emerging from the ruins, ready to begin the work of building something better from the ashes of what had been destroyed. I walked toward the sound, my enhanced senses showing me the way through corridors that were no longer corridors, but pathways through a living structure that breathed with its own life. At the entrance to what had once been the Ark, I found them. Humans and creatures working together to clear debris, to plant seeds in radioactive soil that their combined efforts were somehow healing, to build shelters that looked like they had grown rather than been constructed. A vampire looked up as I approached, his ancient eyes recognizing what I had become. "You are the chronicler," he said, and it wasn't a question. "I am," I replied, my voice carrying harmonics that hadn't been there before. "Then witness this," he said, gesturing to the work being done around us. "Witness the end of the age of fear and the beginning of the age of understanding. Record it all, chronicler. Record the price that was paid for wisdom and the treasures that wisdom brings." I nodded and began to walk among them, observing, learning, remembering. A werewolf was teaching a human child how to speak with the plants, helping her understand that every living thing had its own form of consciousness. A group of demons was working with human engineers to design buildings that would generate their own power from the life force of the creatures living within them. Former ghosts, now solid and purposeful, were sharing memories of historical events that human historians had never recorded correctly. Everywhere I looked, I saw cooperation where there had once been conflict, understanding where there had once been fear, harmony where there had once been the exploitation of the weak by the strong. This was what God had intended from the beginning. This was what creation was supposed to be, and I would record it all. Every moment of growth, every lesson learned, every step toward a better world. I would be the memory of both what humanity had been and what it was becoming. I would carry the stories of the old world and the new, ensuring that future generations understood the price of wisdom and the treasures it brought. In the distance, something that might once have been called a dragon was teaching a group of human children how to fly without wings, showing them that the laws of physics were more flexible than their textbooks had suggested. The children's laughter echoed across the radioactive landscape, a sound of pure joy that somehow made the poisoned earth bloom with flowers that glowed like stars. I walked among the ruins and the wonders, recording everything, understanding at last what it meant to be truly alive in a world where all life was sacred. The old world was dead, the new world was just beginning, and I would be its chronicler until the end of times.